Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3, how to direct people for modeling board game photos or direct models or direct talents in whatever stage that they are in. These are applicable across the board. So today is going to be a fun episode. I feel like it's going to be the most information rich episode out of all the ones we've had so far. But as of the time of this recording, actually the shoot is already done with, it's over. It's actually Tuesday. So a couple days have passed since Saturday's shoot, and I think it's a good thing because I'm now able to talk to you in a much less stressed way, which means I can give you a better, more concise tutorial about how to do what I'm gonna talk about today. However, I did record myself the night before the shoot just to give you a raw reaction, and that's gonna come in the next episode, in episode 4, before the very big shoot in episode 5. But for now, today we are going to talk about how to direct people for board game photos. And we're gonna start off with tip number 1, which is going to be the most cliche tip, but also a very, very important one, and I'm gonna elaborate on that said cliche. So the first one is you have to learn how to really tell a story in your photos. And I feel like modeling people is going to be one big test on how you can do that. With products, with board games, you can just put components together in a frame and you're telling a story in a way that only you can understand. But this time, you have to translate those thoughts in your head with people and how they are interpreting that information. It's a very difficult task. So in order for you to tell a very good story, what I always do is you have to really know the game, right? So you have to know the game, you have to learn as much as you can about the game, play it well. And the reason why is because that is going to give off a better story for your models. For example, here's a really simple one. For this one, I told an FRA he's scoring a windmill in viticulture. He's paying for a windmill and he's handing over coins to Charity. Very, very simple. Charity, on the other hand, you are very, very excited to receive those coins. Kind of like give me that money. Remember, when you are modeling photography like this, most likely, at least the people that I've worked with, have not played these games at all. So it is your job, not only as a photographer, but also as the board gamer too, to understand the game, to know how it plays, and to also make sure that you're trying your best to have everything set up perfectly well. And as you're telling the story about it, you're actually telling them how to play different parts of the game. So that's one really, really important factor that you have to consider for tip number 1, which is learn how to tell a story. And you can do that by understanding the game mechanisms and telling your models to feel a certain way, or just give them a scenario. Give them a really basic scenario about maybe for this one, model A, you have just scored the ultimate victory point, and model B, you just lost that victory point. You were so close to getting and inching away on that victory point track. And model C, you are indifferent maybe to the little quarrel happening between model A and model B. And then model D, you know what? You're super excited because it's kind of like an aha moment, like take that. That's what you get for messing me up on a previous round. So those are the really rich stories that you have to tell, and you have to also plan for, not only during the shoot, but also if you can beforehand as you are directing people. So tip number 1, storytelling. Tip number 2, start with just one model, start with just one person, and focus all of your attention on what you want that person to do. So for example, this one, I told Charity, you know what? I want you to hold this meeple, because in viticulture, you're going to be placing different meeples around the board. So with that one meeple, you'll be generating different actions. So I was like, Charity, hold this meeple in your dominant hand, because you're about to score this meeple and just form a really awesome combo play. And of course, as I'm framing the shot, I just see how good she looks in this frame and how amazing the set is. So I hype her up too, obviously. I compliment her. I'm like, Charity, dude, you look so good. I'm literally telling her how I feel about this amazing, amazing photo that we're about to take. And of course, that's going to generate an authentic reaction, and we get this beautiful, beautiful photo. So that is my tip number 2, which is to work with one model. And then it's also a warm-up for the photographer as well. Once you kind of hone in on what you're able to direct and what you can sense in your first model, then you start adding in model number 2 and 3 and 4, and however many you're working with or however many you're comfortable with. And when you're already comfortable and you form this bond with your first model, when you add in a second one, you're kind of just duplicating that bond. And trust me, the photos will turn out much, much better. So tip number 2, work with one model, figure out what makes them comfortable, figure out what you want the poses to be, or at least your general guideline of how you want those poses to be. And then when you add on a second model, think about how that model is going to be interacting with the second model. And then again, you are reforming those bonds and those relationships, and you're posing them in a way that they're merging together. And of course, add in number 3, following the same exact guideline as if you had just one, as if you had just 2. You're just adding in a little bit more to the mix. Tip number 3, be conscious of the expressions that you want to portray and envision as a photographer. when you're working with a lot of people, you have to be very, very conscious of a ton of different things. You have to be wary of the board game setup, which is a whole thing on its own. You have to be aware of everything else in the background. You have to be aware of the lighting, the flash, the sun setting, the sun not rising yet. You also have to be aware of how the model is positioning their hands, their arms, how they're sitting. Are they slouching? Are they hunched over? There's so many different factors that go into one photo that many people actually don't see at all. But these are the really critical things that you have to pay attention to, and those are expressions. You have to make sure that the expression that you want your model to portray matches what you are envisioning for that particular game. But let's say for the game called Fort, which I think many of you are familiar with, for Fort you are making friends. So what if one of the models is taking a friend away from you? I want this person to be sad that they're taking a friend away from you. I want the person taking that exact friend to be kind of snickering or happy and smiling about it, and the other two maybe celebrating or just watching and seeing this whole interaction play out. So that's the type of guideline that you want to push for your models. You never want to be 100% strict and make sure that you are to the T with poses that you are envisioning. You want to just give them an umbrella of what to work with and then have them just interpret it in any way possible. So ultimately, tip number 3 is to be very, very conscious of your model's expressions and to see whether or not it is matching the current photo that you're taking. The set composition, the lighting, the board game that you're working with, and the mechanism or the gameplay that your models are reenacting in that moment. Now, that is leading me to tip number 4, but before we get to that, are you liking all the tips so far? Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the photos so far. I'm super excited to show you the entire showcase, which I'm gonna have on my brand new website as well, an entire portfolio dedicated to board game lifestyle photos. But until then, let's move on to tip number 4. Tip number 4, you have to give your models breaks. They are not products, they're not your board games. You can't just compose them any way you wish and just leave them, let them be. You have to remember that they are people. Put yourself in their shoes. They are smiling for you the entire day. That is exhausting. So make sure you give them plenty of breaks, switch out your models. That's why I actually had more than 3, because even if the whole budget was for like 3 to 4 models, maybe up to 5 models, I still had them switch out with different models because again, some models would get tired and you can see that when it's framed in the photo. So I always like to have more models than expected because again, you don't know how people are going to react in different moments. You don't know if people are gonna be tired faster than others. And I always encourage that you are conscious of that because again, they're smiling for you all day. They're listening to your directions. They have a giant heat lamp burning at their face while they're wearing a sweater and it gets hotter and hotter throughout the day. There's just so many things that you always have to consider and just put yourself in their shoes. It's not always the most comforting thing to have someone tell you to smile and do this and do that and have heat directed at you and all that. So I always like to keep my models really, really happy. I just make it a very, very fun environment overall, or at least I try to. I give them a ton of breaks. I give them food, breakfast, lunch, whatever they need, whatever they're most comfortable with. I always try to encourage that because again, they're people, make sure that you are aware of that and that you're treating them as nicely as possible. Ultimately, think about it. The lifestyle photos, what's the whole point of having lifestyle photography? It's to show how fun and entertaining and interesting your game is. How can it be all those things if your models aren't happy, right? So keep them happy. Now leading on to the final tip for today, tip number 5. This one, for the most part, I can't stand micromanaging. I am not a micromanaging person. I try not to be, and I'm always conscious and aware of when I am and am not micromanaging people. I don't like to do that. So with that said, tip number 5 is to don't overcomplicate the pose and don't be too strict on what you are envisioning. Just give a general guideline of what you want. The exact same principles apply to portrait photography and family photography and everything else. When you're switching on over here to board game lifestyle photography or board game style shoots, whatever you want to call it. But when you're going for these types of photos, when you have expressions that people and poses that you want people to do, you have to be open and flexible to how they are interpreting your shot. For example, you don't be like, don't slouch, lean forward more, put your arm this way, put your other arm this way, hold the card like this, and look down, look up towards me and shift your eyes towards the camera and pretend that you are happy about the component. See, it's like super awkward, right? So instead, give a general guideline about what you want them to do. For example, I'll just say, guys, for this pose, everyone just celebrate and keep it super simple. And then everyone has their own way of what celebrate means. Claire will do, something like this, and she'll stand up from her seat, and Jane will also stand up, but then she'll kind of lean over. And then we'll just have everyone else doing unique, genuine poses of what they think celebrate means. And trust me, when you have that genuine feeling and emotion that you've already set by just having your scenario put forth that is very general, it's going to cause it's going to cause a bigger commotion. B, it's going to cause just a better, more unique and fun reaction. If you know me and you know this channel by now, you know I don't like standardized things. I don't like things that are just copy and paste. So I always try to generate a unique reaction. And one way to do that, give a general scenario. Don't be too strict on your poses and just let them interpret it however you want it. If the pose doesn't end up being what you like, just change it. Because remember, there's never a one pose fits all. For example, you kind of learn about your models and their characteristics and how they interact with people and how they interact with your directions as the day goes on. And Nefer, for instance, is very, very good at bold poses like this. Claire, on the other hand, is very, very good at being animated in her poses. So you always want to play to their strengths and again, just let them have total free control over it. And if it doesn't work out, just switch to another pose and that's it. Simple as that. So those are my 5 tips for how to direct people in lifestyle photography. I hope you all found that helpful. I will see you all very, very soon in episode 4, where we're talking about just a general last minute plan, and then we'll dive into the final episode. Or I said 5 episodes was gonna be the max for this mini series, but I do want to do an episode 6, kind of like an epilogue of these are lessons that I've learned as this shoot went on. But until then, thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you all in episode 4.